What if your favorite neighborhood restaurant suddenly disappeared? That's exactly what's happening right now. Canada, once a loyal customer of American fast food, has turned away, systematically, in just 2 years. Over 1,000 U.S. restaurant locations have closed their doors across the border. Applebees gone from over 400 towns, Red Lobster, over 120 locations shuttered, Dunkin, more than 500 stores gone. This isn't just a drop in foot traffic, but a warning shot. A mass rejection of American food culture from a country we've always considered family. And as they pull back, the fallout hits us here at home. Jobs lost, towns hollowed out, memories erased. So ask yourself, if even our closest ally won't eat with us anymore, who will? And what happens when this silent boycott spreads? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. And today, we reveal the 15 U.S. restaurant chains quietly banned across Canada. Stay with us, because number 3 will make you mourn the good old days, for good. Number 1, IHOP. IHOP used to be a symbol of weekend comfort, where breakfast felt like a ritual and not just another meal, for over 6 decades. It stood as a gentle reminder of American simplicity, hot coffee, warm pancakes, and familiar faces across the table. Whether you were a truck driver stopping in after a long haul, or a family of 5 celebrating a birthday, the experience felt welcoming. It was honest food, reasonably priced, and always served under that recognizable blue roof. At one point, there were more than 1,600 IHOPs dotting the country, many just a short drive from the Canadian border, a gateway for weekend travelers looking for American comfort food. But something's changed. Since the year 2022, a quiet disappearance has been sweeping across the northern U.S. border towns. IHOPs that once served crowds of Canadian families on Saturdays are now closing one by one. Minnesota, North Dakota, New Hampshire states that once thrived on cross-border diners have seen over 60 IHOP locations vanish. There were no dramatic headlines, no protests, just locked doors and silence. This isn't just a corporate failure. It's a reflection of something deeper Canadians have stopped coming. And when you look closer, the reason is plain. From 2021 to 2023, egg prices in the U.S. soared by over 50%. A plate that cost under $8 just a few years ago can now set you back nearly $15 before the tip. Meanwhile, the Canadian dollar has weakened, gas prices have surged, and border restrictions have made travel more frustrating. That pancake breakfast that once felt like a treat, it's now a financial burden for many Canadians. But cost is only one part of the story. Social media platforms like TikTok and Reddit have been filled with complaints from Canadian customers in the past year. They've compared their IHOP visits to eating at a gas station diner watery coffee, overcooked eggs, sticky booths, and staff that looked overwhelmed or disengaged. And while Canadians once looked forward to the American diner charm, they're now turning to homegrown chains like Cora or Eggsmart. These local places offer better prices, friendlier service, and a cleaner atmosphere. In some cases, entire weekend trips across the border have been replaced by brunch closer to home. And then there's the human cost. Most rural IHOP workers are people living paycheck to paycheck part-time servers, single mothers, college students, and retirees. Many lost their jobs with little warning, no severance, no transition, just an empty parking lot and a closed sign taped to the window. As this trend continues, Dine Brands. IHOP's parent company has already warned that up to 100 more closures could come by 2026. This isn't just about breakfast anymore. It's about whether an old American favorite can survive in a world where loyalty is no longer a guarantee. In Canada today, the morning meal is alive and well, just not under IHOP's roof. So now the question is, has IHOP lost its soul? Or has it simply been priced out of relevance? Number 2, KFC. What happens when something as simple and cherished as a bucket of fried chicken once the cheapest? Quickest way to bring the family together suddenly feels like a luxury no one can justify for decades. KFC was more than just a fast food stop. It was a Friday night tradition, a celebration meal on a cold winter evening, or that one treat after a hard week's work. It offered something familiar, crispy, and comforting in a world that kept getting faster and more uncertain. But now, in Canada, that comfort is quietly slipping away. The shock came in the year 2023, when a report from Consumer Reports triggered a nationwide wake-up call. The findings were unsettling. Trace amounts of harmful industrial chemicals were detected in various fried chicken samples, and multiple pieces tested from KFC were among the worst. The news spread like wildfire, not just in newspapers or TV segments, but in the digital spaces where younger Canadians gather. TikTok hashtags, viral Reddit threads, and countless online reactions made one thing crystal clear: trust in KFC had cracked, maybe permanently. It wasn't just bad publicity, it was a cultural shift. Canadian customers, particularly younger generations, felt betrayed. They weren't just rejecting KFC for what it had become, they were mourning what it used to mean in its heyday. KFC had over 700 restaurants across Canada. It wasn't just a fast food chain, it was part of the rhythm of life. Families depended on it, for some. It was the only affordable way to put something hot and filling on the table for everyone. Now dozens of those locations are gone. The doors shuttered without warning, the lights off, the buckets vanished. But the collapse of KFC in Canada wasn't due to a single scandal. It was the result of a deeper, ongoing misalignment between what KFC offered and what modern Canadian consumers demanded. Canada has steadily leaned into cleaner food, plant-based alternatives, and transparency. Brands like A&W have responded by offering hormone-free meats, plant-based patties, and clear sourcing practices. Meanwhile, KFC doubled down on nostalgia and low-cost industrial chicken, a move that, by 2025, no longer fit the times. And while Canada moves forward, the U.S. may be on the same path, just a few steps behind. Combo meals that once cost $7 or $8 are now pushing past $12. For many working-class families, what once fed 3 or 4 mouths now barely covers one tray. And while some people say, just cook at home, the reality isn't so simple. Not every American has the time, energy, or budget to cook 3 times a day. Grocery prices are rising. Fresh meat and produce are harder to afford. When a KFC meal slips out of reach, it's not just the food we're losing, it's a piece of reliability, of routine, of something we used to count on. That's why this silent boycott from Canada stings more than we'd like to admit. It's not about fried chicken. It's about watching a place you once trusted fade away. And for those of us who remember what it felt like to unwrap that red and white box, the loss is more personal than corporate. If a KFC meal once brought you comfort, laughter, or a quiet moment of joy, take a second to remember it, because now, across the border, that memory is all that's left. Number 3, Applebees. Who would have imagined that a country with just a fraction of the U.S. economy, barely 1/10 its size, could quietly pull the plug on one of America's most recognizable and affordable restaurant chains? But that's exactly what's happening right now. Canada, long considered a reliable partner in weekend dining traditions, has walked away from Applebees, not loudly, not with protest signs or angry headlines, but with silence. And that silence may just be the thing that brings this American giant to its knees. For many Americans, especially working-class families from the late 1990s through the early 2000s, Applebee's wasn't just another eatery, it was the second living room, a space where life's little milestones played out over burgers and mozzarella sticks. It was where dad could grab a cold beer after a rough week, where kids split dessert after a little league game, and where families knew they could count on dinner for under $40. With more than 2,000 locations at its peak, Applebee's touched nearly every corner of American life, from small southern towns to the snowy edges of the Midwest. But it wasn't just American families sitting in those booths. Every weekend, thousands of Canadian visitors crossed the border for day trips. They'd hit Walmart for discount groceries, swing by the mall, and finish the day at Applebee's. In states like New York, Michigan, and Washington, Canadian customers made up as much as 30% of weekend business, according to a 2018 Technomic industry report. That regular, predictable revenue stream wasn't just nice, it was necessary. It kept lights on. It kept paychecks flowing. By late 2024, though, that cushion was gone. Applebee's had dropped to 1,586 U.S. locations, a loss of over 400 in less than a decade. And internal forecasts leaked in early 2025 showed an even more alarming trend: dozens more locations, especially near the Canadian border, were on track to close by the end of the year. The reason: a collapse in Canadian traffic. So what changed part of it was economics. Higher gas prices, a weak Canadian dollar, border traffic that never fully bounced back after the pandemic. But the deeper wound came from something far more personal and far more damaging. In 2022, a leaked email from an Applebee's executive suggested that inflation could help the company by making people desperate enough to accept lower-paying jobs. The implication was chilling that economic hardship was a business opportunity. The backlash in Canada was immediate. The email hit a nerve in a country that prizes labor rights, fairness, and respect for the working class. Applebee's didn't just lose customers, it lost trust. Canadians didn't scream or protest. They simply didn't come back. And that quiet retreat has triggered one of the largest slow-motion collapses of a restaurant brand in recent memory. Now, that absence is being felt in real, human ways. Servers with 10 or even 20 years of service were laid off with no warning. In rural towns where Applebee's was the only sit-down option, families now face long drives for a hot meal. Elderly couples who once shared Sunday dinners feel the loss in their routine. And parents juggling multiple jobs have one less way to show their kids a bit of normalcy. Canadian chains like Swiss Chalet and Boston Pizza have stepped in, not with fanfare, but with reliability. Their prices remain steady, their food is consistent, and most importantly, their reputation remains intact. Applebee's, on the other hand, now represents something older, more fragile, an American brand that lost touch with the people who made it matter. Not every Canadian set out to abandon Applebee's. But when enough people quietly choose somewhere else, the result is just the same. So now we ask ourselves, what do we do when an old friend fades away? When the booths are empty and the memories sit cold? That's not just a restaurant closing, it's a bond broken. And if you think this is the saddest story on the list, wait until you hear what's coming next. Number 4, Olive Garden. There was a time when a booth at Olive Garden meant celebration, anniversaries, graduations, a Friday night splurge with the family for millions of middle-class Americans. Olive Garden offered something rare, an affordable escape wrapped in Italian ambiance, with more than 850 locations at its peak. It was the place where unlimited breadsticks felt like a gift, not a gimmick, but in 2025, those booths are emptier, and what's vanishing is a piece of America's shared memory. Quietly walking out the door with Canadian tourists who've chosen not to come back. Between 2015 and 2019, in states like Vermont, Michigan, and New York, internal Dine Brands data showed that as many as 1 in every 4 weekend Olive Garden guests came from Canada. They crossed the border for a familiar setting, a no surprises menu, and no awkward tipping culture. But by mid-2024, that flow had slowed to a trickle. Locations near the border began shutting down without warning. The spark? A 30% plunge in Canadian traffic, fueled by rising gas prices, a weakening Canadian dollar, and a scandal far more damaging. In early 2023, headlines broke that Gene Lee, the former CEO of Darden Restaurants, had received over $11 million in stock compensation, just as thousands of part-time workers across Olive Garden were being laid off. The backlash in Canada was immediate and intense. A viral Twitter trend. Drop Darden, spread across the country. Reddit Canada lit up with users slamming the company's greed, its tone-deaf leadership, and the poor quality of food served by overworked, underpaid staff. For many Canadians, that was the last straw. They stopped coming. The consequences are painfully visible in American towns. Retirees lost their weekly gathering spot. Students looking for weekend hours found the doors locked. Seniors on fixed incomes who once relied on server tips to stretch each month now face empty job boards. In the void, Canadian brands like Eastside Mario's and Moxie's have stepped in. Their prices are 20 to 25% lower. Their atmosphere modern. Their service local and sincere. One Canadian Redditor put it bluntly, "Why drive 3 hours for reheated ravioli when I can walk to the corner and support my neighbor Dine Brands?" Now warns that up to 80 more U.S. locations may shut down by the end of 2025 if Canada's quiet boycott continues. And if the UK, Australia, or other post-trade shift nations follow suit, Olive Garden's international presence could disappear before 2026. So as the breadsticks go cold and the booths stay silent, we're not just losing a restaurant, we're watching the slow erasure of something that once brought us together. Number 5, McDonald's. What if the fall of McDonald's didn't come from its enemies, but from the silent retreat of one of its closest friends, Canada, in 2024? McDonald's revenue dropped by 19% in Quebec, with similar losses in Ontario, once a symbol of American comfort. With over 1,400 locations across Canada, McDonald's was more than food, it was part of daily life. Childhood road trips, late-night stops, family meals. But now, the golden arches are fading into the background. Border town restaurants sit half empty. The lights are still on, but the warmth is gone. Why post-COVID spending caution? A weak Canadian dollar and skyrocketing gas and grocery costs hit hard, but even deeper. Cultural shifts are reshaping choices. Movements like Stop Eating Ultra-Processed Food have turned McDonald's into a target, especially among Canadian Gen Z. The rejection isn't loud, it's distant, quiet, and personal. For Americans near the border, the impact is real. Without Canadian foot traffic, local McDonald's close. For working families, students, and retirees, that means lost jobs, lost gathering spaces, and no more affordable breakfast. When even McDonald's is quietly abandoned, we're left asking what trusted parts of life might vanish next. Number 6, Dunkin. What happens when your morning coffee no longer waits for you? When even the smallest comfort disappears without a sound? For decades, Dunkin was the heartbeat of the early American morning. A warm $2 coffee, a plastic chair by the window, the soft hum of neighbors starting their day. It welcomed truckers, nurses, teachers, retirees, everyone. But now, the rhythm is breaking. Between 2022 and 2024, foot traffic at Dunkin stores near the U.S. Canada border dropped by up to 25%. Towns in Vermont, New Hampshire, and upstate New York felt it first. Canadian customers stopped coming. No protest, no drama, just absence. Gas prices climbed, the Canadian dollar weakened, and Gen Z turned to craft espresso and boutique cafes. Dunkin didn't adapt and got left behind. In rural America, closures are spreading. Older workers and immigrants lose hours. Community tables sit empty. The familiar morning ritual replaced with silence and homemade coffee. One Vermont Dunkin closed overnight. No notice, just a bricked-up window where laughter used to live. This wasn't a war, it was a quiet goodbye. And in losing it, we lost a part of our mornings and maybe a piece of ourselves. Number 7, Subway. For 2 decades, we believed Subway was the better choice, a healthier meal, a cleaner option. A sandwich that showed we cared. But between 2020 and 2024, over 1,000 Subway stores quietly closed across North America. In Canada, revenue collapsed in provinces like British Columbia and Quebec. Cross-border visits to U.S. Subway locations dropped by nearly 30%. There was no scandal, no outcry, just a quiet unraveling. Doubts about the freshness, suspicion that Eat Fresh was just marketing. And while Subway stood still, Canadian brands like Freshii and Tim Hortons offered local, organic, trusted alternatives. So Canada walked away silently. Now, the impact is personal. Elderly Americans who relied on a light, affordable lunch find empty storefronts. In working-class towns, where Subway was once the only healthy meal option, closures are rising, the sandwiches remain, but the meaning is gone. One plaza in Vermont says it all. The lights are off, the chairs are stacked, nothing's broken, but it's over. When even a sandwich shop loses our trust, what else are we slowly letting go of without saying a word? Number 8, Burger King. Burger King once stood for choice. Have it your way meant more than toppings, it meant the working class still had a say. At its peak, over 11,000 locations served more than 11 million people daily. But by 2023, that promise faded. Over 400 U.S. stores closed. In Canada, malls in Ontario and Alberta quietly replaced Burger King with A&W and Harvey's brands seen as cleaner, more local, more now. The reasons are visible. Cross-border trips vanished as gas prices soared and sentiment cooled. Canadians rejected greasy meals and static menus. Burger King stayed stuck in the past, no clean labels, no app ordering, no evolution. While America clung to nostalgia, Canada moved on. The pain lands hardest on the forgotten. Seniors who use paper coupons, workers needing one hot, simple sandwich late at night. Towns where Burger King was the only spot open after 9. In Kansas, one location still shows the crown, but inside, the fryer's cold, the window's cracked, the choice is gone. And when even the Whopper disappears, maybe the real loss isn't fast food, but the quiet truth that those who relied on it no longer feel seen. Number 9, Red Lobster. Red Lobster was once the place we saved for special days, anniversaries, birthdays, Milestones that deserved more than drive-through food. It felt like luxury we could reach. With over 700 locations worldwide, it welcomed families across income levels. In northern U.S. states, cross-border Canadian diners helped fuel the experience, making up over 12% of weekend traffic by 2015. But in May 2024, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy after reporting nearly $11 million in losses for one quarter, within 6 months. 99 stores had closed, many in places where generations once gathered around a seafood platter. The decline was quiet, fewer tourists, rising costs, a weakening Canadian dollar. Then came the scandal. In 2023, the Endless Shrimp campaign approved by the CEO drove massive losses. Canadian media mocked it as a buffet built on a black hole. Now the fallout is real. Thousands of workers, many single moms and retirees, were left behind. In towns like Michigan and Vermont, Red Lobster didn't just vanish, it left behind silence. And maybe the worst part, that empty plate reminds us even tradition can be forgotten when no one is watching. Number 10. Buffalo Wild Wings. Buffalo Wild Wings. With over 1,200 locations, it brought game day to life in towns across Michigan, New York, and beyond. Super Bowl seats were booked a week ahead. UFC nights turned tables into cheering crowds. And in border cities, Canadians crossed over for wings, beer, and energy. But between 2021 and 2024, the roar faded. Over 100 stores closed, including in cities like Buffalo and Spokane. Inspire Brands' 2023 report showed border locations saw an 11% revenue drop. Worse, Canadian visits fell 35%. Why wings that cost 89 cents now go for $1.79. Beer prices surged post-pandemic. Canada's own sports bars, the Canadian Brewhouse. Boston Pizza offered the same buzz, closer and cheaper. Then came the backlash. A 2023 TikTok showed staff in Ohio ignoring Asian customers. The video sparked outrage, especially in Canada's diverse communities. Complaints of dirty kitchens and poor service followed. Now, the screens are still on, but the crowds are gone. Weekend workers lost income, and the shared magic of game night fading fast. Number 11. The Cheesecake Factory. There was a time when the Cheesecake Factory felt like a celebration in every bite velvet booths. Towering desserts, and menus thicker than novels. For Canadians, it was part of the trip. In cities like Buffalo and Burlington, nearly 18% of diners came from across the border, spending over $60 per visit. But by 2024, the glow faded. Revenue at border locations dropped 12%. Vacancy rates rose 25%. On TikTok, Canadians filmed quiet dining rooms, calling them museums of forgotten celebrations. Staff echoed the silence some hours passed with no orders at all. Why Canadian chains like Moxie's and Jack Astor's now offer modern design and full bars for 15 to 20% less. And after U.S. Canada trade tensions, many simply chose homegrown brands not just for price, but out of principle. Then came scandal. In 2022, the Cheesecake Factory was fined for hiding $150 million in pandemic losses. Reports of unpaid overtime and staff cuts followed. Canadians noticed. Now, birthdays happen elsewhere. Seniors miss their favorite booth. Workers lose weekend shifts. And when even dessert disappears, what sweetness of America still remains? Number 12. TGI Fridays. Stepping into a TGI Fridays used to feel like walking into celebration, blinking neon signs, sizzling plates, and cocktails tall enough to toast a whole table. Canadians made it a part of every long weekend road trip. Cities like Buffalo and Seattle counted on them for nearly a fifth of Friday's weekend traffic at the brand's height, when it ran more than 900 locations worldwide. But in 2024, that glow is gone. Only about 270 U.S. stores remain, a steep fall from over 700 in 2010. Every Canadian location closed in 2023. The chain couldn't keep up with rising rent, wages, or customer expectations. A Restaurants Canada survey revealed 74% of Canadians under 45 called it overpriced fast food. Reddit threads echoed the shift. I used to visit Buffalo's Fridays every long weekend. It's gone now and I don't miss it. While Earl's, Moxie's, and the Rec Room modernized, Fridays stayed frozen in the early 2000s. Under Tri-Artisan Capital Advisors, it also faced backlash after franchise sales were tied to misleading financial reports. Now, border towns are left with shuttered doors, empty booths, and unemployed weekend staff, and with Friday's charm fading. What other American traditions might quietly be next? Number 13. Starbucks. No headlines, no protest, just empty chairs and quiet exits. Starbucks, once the universal symbol of modern life, is vanishing where it mattered most. Since 2020, over 400 North American stores have closed. In Canada alone, 144 shuttered in 2023. Border cities like Vancouver, Detroit, and Buffalo were hit hard. These weren't just coffee shops, they were gathering points for both nations. But the crowd is gone. Gen Z Canadians now favor eco-conscious indie cafes. Gas prices and a weak Canadian dollar keep travelers local. For middle-aged Americans, choosing between meds and groceries makes a $6 latte feel selfish. The Siren Cup once promised belonging. Now, it feels out of reach. Office workers brew at home. Retirees glance at the menu, then walk away. The cafes echo with silence. One Robson Street location in Vancouver stands dark and hollow. No jazz, no baristas, just a logo fading from memory. Starbucks wasn't just American, it was shared. Its quiet rejection now feels like distance between neighbors. Not anger, but indifference. And maybe that's the most unsettling part, losing not the coffee, but the feeling we were still connected. In 2025, it's not just storefronts closing, it's something deeper, something heavier. It's the fading heartbeat of Sunday mornings at IHOP, the hush where laughter used to echo inside Red Lobster booths, the slow vanishing of places that once felt like home. What we're really losing is not a meal or a menu, it's the comfort of knowing exactly where to go when life got too hard to cook. And then, almost quietly, Canada, once the neighbor who always showed up, began to turn away. No press conferences, no headlines, just a subtle shift. Fewer tourists, fewer trade trucks, fewer reasons for chains to keep their lights on this side of the border. The silence grew louder. If other countries do the same, what's left for the towns built around these familiar signs? What happens when the last booth goes empty and the last affordable cup of coffee disappears? This isn't just economic decline, it's cultural erosion, the unraveling of the small, ordinary joys that held our days together. And now we ask ourselves, was this collapse sudden? Or did it begin with the first quiet goodbye we chose not to notice?